So the next, let's make sure this is still going. Woohoo, okay. It's still alive, full of battery. I just put some batteries in it, because remember we were doing urinary system, and I was like, what the heck is this? The next one we're going to be looking at is female reproduction. Yes, we're done with males. So just like with the other one, with the male, we went through the organs, and then what's up here now? We went through the male organs, and then we went through the endocrine system. We're gonna do kind of the same thing with the female. Worksheet number 4 goes into her ovaries, oogenesis, so we had spermatogenesis, and also follicular maturation. Follicular maturation, a follicle. Follicular is the cell, which we're going to talk about the egg. The male, it's the sperm. We're then going to talk about the female reproductive organs, female hormone control, which looks like this, because the female hormones are kind of all over the place, so this will be nice. And then menstrual cycle, which just looks like this. Woohoo! This is my favorite one, menstrual cycle. Next, we're going to be talking about the last worksheet. We'll jump back into male reproductive disorders, and then female reproductive disorders. So, and then sexually transmitted diseases. And then that'll be it. So we'll just get into females and abnormalities, and then genes. So, yay. Let's see now. Yep.
I don't know what oogenesis is. I have no idea what that is.
Okay, so spermatogenesis.
And this is just in the males, right? Oogenesis?
Spermatogenesis is in the male.
Okay.
Genesis is in the female. Spermatogenesis, so sperm means cell, genesis means like to grow. So spermatogenesis, that whole process, I'll put this in the folder. I know you don't have it because you're in Janet's, but Mark has something like this, a diagram of it. This is spermatogenesis. Basically, it shows how sperm cells develop. And that's what the first worksheet kind of went, or the second worksheet that we went through. For the female, we have oogenesis, which is the female area, which looks like this. So, and I'll put his notes in there so the people in Janet's section can look at it if they want. But oogenesis, means like egg. And genesis also means to grow. So we're looking at egg growth now. Before we looked at sperm growth, now we get to pay attention to our eggs. How babies are produced. But apparently we need sperm for that. So, let's zoom in a little. How they were. Yeah, imagine if I have kids. Mom, how does a baby happen? Well, we're going to learn about oogenesis before anything else, right? And spermatogenesis, we're going to learn this. Blow their mind. So oogenesis, this is the first section. The primary female sex organs is also known as the ovaries. Ovaries produce female sex cells and hormones. Sex cells being the egg. Hormones in the female being estrogen. Okay, didn't get dirty. The ovaries are held in place by ligaments. So they're kind of suspended in us. And the thing is, too, ovaries, I'm looking for something the size of an ovary. Ovaries are like itty bitty, and the tubes that come from the ovaries, what are those called?
Fallopian tubes.
Fallopian tubes. Yep, I forgot. That's why I asked you. But the fallopian tubes are the size of spaghetti. So you think about all that pain you go through. It has to do with something the size of this and something the string of a spaghetti.
Yeah.
Lucky us. I think our body's trying to tell us you can be impregnated now. And it's like no. Why are you doing this? So what is false in relation to ovarian tissue? This is tissue on the ovaries. The outer layer is known as ovarian cortex. Inner layer is ovarian medulla. The false thing is the ovarian cortex, not the cortex, but the medulla contains lymphatic and blood vessels. So if you think about that's interesting. The medulla is the inside of the ovary, has lymphatic and blood vessels. The blood vessels is to nourish the eggs inside of the ovary, and the lymphatic vessels are to protect it from like bacteria and everything like that. So that's pretty neat. Of course, that's there, and we don't have anything for UTIs, but that's great. What's interesting, ovarian follicles, so the egg cells, are located on the outside of the ovary. So you have some on the outside. And then the ovarian follicles have an ova, also known as an egg inside of them. And when we go through the menstrual cycle, this will make more sense. This whole thing, this whole thing is a follicle, okay? So think about eggs. Yummy. I had eggs this morning. So the whole thing is like the egg, okay? This is all a follicle. But the ovum, ova. But the ova is the middle portion, kind of like the egg yolk, the yellow portion of the egg. And this is the part that becomes the baby. This portion will become the, it starts with an L. Not lumen, close. That's an L word. It will become the corpus luteum. Luteum.
That's what I was thinking. But
Yeah.
I didn't get it out
No,
right.
you're fine. I couldn't figure it out either. I had to look. So the corpus luteum is kind of the white part of the egg. The ovum is the egg yolk. Yeah. And this will, when we go through it, we'll go through this more with the menstrual cycle. Yay. Okay. So, taking that off. My shirt is funny. And the ovum is also known as an oocyte. Oocyte means egg cell, the egg yolk. Ovum, oocyte, egg. So the production of female sex cells is known as oogenesis. This is true, right, because we talked about it, the growth of eggs. Females are born with a limited amount of oocytes. This is true. If you're born, why do you think false?
Oh, is that not limited?
Limited.
Oh, yeah.
Limited, just a little,
Okay,
yeah.
I thought unlimited. Never mind.
Yeah, males can just produce sperm and sperm and sperm, but females, you're born with 30, you only have 30, which, that's kind of nice. I mean, you go through menopause, which sucks. But the thing is, at least you don't have periods till you're like 100. And the reason why that you're born with just so little is because, when the female body is like 70, you are not able to have a baby. You know what I mean? Your body's not strong enough to support another thing.
And I don't either, like, physical or mental, like,
Yeah.
do all that.
Yeah.
Either.
Yeah. So it's kind of like a protective mechanism for us. But males, they can do whatever they want. So when a female runs out of menopause, let's do this in red. There's menopause and menarche. So menopause means, meno kind of means like period. Menopause means you stop your period. Menarche is when you start your period. Yeah. So the first period someone has, then that they're considered menarche or menarche. It kind of looks like this. I might have spelled it wrong. But, yeah. And then when she goes through menopause, she's infertile, has no more eggs. The oocyte will go through the first meiotic division when the female goes through puberty, right? We talked about estrogen earlier in the male section. The more estrogen you have, that triggers, estrogen from the fat distribution triggers you to go through puberty. When you were a baby girl, I'm going to read this, your oocytes started in meiosis 1, but meiosis 1 soon stopped. So the thing is, when you're born, you go through meiosis 1, but then they just kind of sit there for a while. Okay? Primary oocytes were stored during childhood. So they were stored, they were stored, they were stored, and then you start puberty. The oocyte will then complete the first meiotic division during puberty. So a female's period will mean that she's going through meiosis 1. So in the male, they go through mitosis, meiosis 1, meiosis 2, just, all that. The female, well, when they hit puberty and everything. But the female goes through, we start meiosis 1, and then it stops. We live our childhood, and then we're like, oh, meiosis 2. There's blood in our underwear. So that's kind of how it happens. Kind of starts and stops. Well, in the male, they just go through puberty, and it's like, okay.
So when you actually start your period, it's meiosis 1.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So I'm going to pull up that picture of Mark's class.
I'm just trying to get it in my head.
This one? Yeah.
It's organized like almost like all steps.
Yeah, I think I'm just going to put all this because
It's like
someone,
like
the reason why I didn't, I'll just upload these notes to there so you guys have that. But I just didn't want to steal his stuff and be like, oh, I made this, because that's kind of like copyright. I don't think he'd do anything, but so you have a primary oocyte. Okay, the primary oocyte goes through meiosis 1, right? Your baby, you go through meiosis 1, and then it stops. No. Yeah, your meiosis 1 is your period. So you have your period, and you have this egg next, okay? Oh, go ahead. You could probably take a better picture of her notes than it is up here, just so that you don't have the reflection.
Well, I have the notes in there, but
that's good. Thank you.
So.
I'm kind of confused on where you have, okay, because how you just said that the girl, when she's born, so is that at the primary oocyte you said? Okay, I'm
Yeah.
just trying to get it straight.
Primary oocytes when she's born.
Okay, and then it stops until you hit puberty.
So where meiosis 2 is on your chart, or meiosis 1, this little box, put equals puberty. So on your, put that to a note to the side.
Okay,
So when she goes through puberty, so this is in her body, and then she goes through puberty, produce this one. We're only focused on these 2 cells. This other stuff, don't worry about it yet.
Okay.
So,
I'm just trying to get it straight because I feel like I'm just kind of lost a little bit.
this one's a little bit harder.
Okay.
See, I'm going to scroll up to the male really fast. In the male, oh God, where are you? Yeah, this is the male. In the male, it's really easy because he just, oh, puberty, okay, divide.
Yeah.
But in the female, it happens in stages. Meiosis 1 is puberty. Meiosis 2 is when the egg gets fertilized.
Okay, so meiosis 2.
So it happens in stages.
And that is right when,
And that is when,
I'm trying to go back to this is, but this is a male. I'm trying to go off of this, but this is male, right?
well, it's both. It is both.
Oh, it is?
Yeah, they go, the female and the male both go through meiosis 1 and meiosis 2.
Okay, so then when we do meiosis 2, it's when it divides. You have 2 of each.
So this is the start of a female period.
Okay.
So she has her period, and then this is the end result. She produces a lot. She goes through telophase. Telophase produces a lot. However, in the male, all those sperm become sperm. In the female, only one of these In the female, there's 4, but in this picture, there's only 2. One of these will be a first polar body, which means that's just extra cell material, and it's recycled. Okay. This next one in the female will become alpha female or alpha egg, and it will get all the nutrients, you know. So, you know, because we only want one. If we go through enough pain for one, we don't want 2. But in the male, when they go through this telophase and everything, both cells go through it, go through the process, yeah. And males just produce sperm and sperm and sperm. Yeah, but in the female, only one of these eggs will survive after meiosis 1. So that's why you have up here, I'm just going to zoom in to break it down. So this is, you're born with this. You live out your life. You know, you got this. You then go through puberty, and puberty is meiosis 1. So equals puberty. So when this happens, you're going to have a first polar body. And the first polar body is recycled. So in the male, the extra cells in the male will become sperm. In the female, it becomes genetic material, and it goes back to the ovary. But then the second one that comes from meiosis 1, you know, because at the end of meiosis 1, you have 2 daughter cells. But the second one will become potential for the baby. Potential. So this happens when meiosis 1 happens, and this will make a lot more sense, I think, when we go through the menstrual cycle. Okay. When you have a secondary oocyte, it will leave the ovary, go to the fallopian tubule, and wait to be fertilized. Okay, so it'll kind of travel there. So at the end of meiosis 1, you either have, it'll be waiting there, and 2 things can happen once that, so the egg will leave the ovary, egg will be in the fallopian tube. When it's in the fallopian tube, there are 2 things that can happen. The egg will live or the egg will die. If the egg dies, you go through your period, and all of that extra blood that your body was building up to support the baby is then teared down, and then that comes out. That happens if the egg dies. If the egg lives, it's because it came in contact with the sperm, and if the egg lives, it will then travel to the uterus, and it will implant and become a baby. When the egg comes in contact with the sperm, that causes meiosis 2. So a good way to remember this is in this diagram. You have 2 cells. Okay, in this picture, they're split and they're coming apart. But for meiosis 2 in the female, there are 2 cells, the sperm and the egg, coming together. And that will cause the egg to go through genetic dividing. So see right here, so this happens first, so 1, 2. The sperm then comes along. Can I drag him? He then comes along. I can't do anything. He comes along, he touches the secondary oocyte that's implanted. Once the sperm touches that, then they both go through meiosis 2. So meiosis 2 is fertilization. Yeah, and then you produce the second polar body, because then, so the thing is you have some genetic material that will become the baby, then you have extra genetic material that just gets recycled. So it kind of gets thrown out, and then you have, that's the second polar body. But meiosis 2 happens when it's fertilized. Make sense? And then after that, the combination, and this is why I think the female one is harder, because you have 2 instead of just 1. The combination of sperm and egg, when they go through meiosis 2, they don't split, they stay together, versus in this picture they kind of split apart. Yeah. But in meiosis, at the end of meiosis 2, they're going to stay together, and it's going to become a zygote. And a zygote is what can become a baby. So let's make sure this was recorded. So it's kind of tough, but I think just some refreshing of it. And I think definitely, it happens in stages. Primary oocyte, childhood, meiosis 1, that's your period. If that egg gets fertilized, meiosis 2. If that egg dies, no meiosis 2, the egg dies and you have your period. Yeah. See, this is why it's good to be a female when talking about female stuff, because males wouldn't know. So the oocyte, yeah, so that kind of indicated right there. We talked about it. So I'm going to say this again. When you were a baby girl, your primary oocyte started meiosis 1. But meiosis 1 soon stopped. So it kind of started, then it stopped and was on pause. Primary oocytes are stored during childhood. The oocyte will then complete the first meiotic split during puberty. So meiosis 1, when that's completed, that's puberty. Meiosis 1 is puberty. Meiosis 2 is then when the sperm and egg come in contact and they become a zygote. Okay? I know it's going to take a while. So, woohoo. So I put this graph kind of based off of Mark's, but not copied. So this is the process of oogenesis. So label each process and then cross out what is discarded. And what is discarded is what is like recycled, like the first polar body. So the following questions, so we're going to go through questions that go over this. So you have your primary oocyte, right? Which we had in Mark's. This is primary oocyte up here, right? So we're going to start right there, but I just have it here for you guys. You're then going to go through meiosis 1, also known as puberty. Am I going to get that? Yeah. During meiosis 1 or puberty, you're going to have a polar body, which is going to be extra genetic material. This has been recycled, so you can cross that off. See, it stops here because nothing happens. Primary oocyte, you go through puberty, you produce a secondary oocyte. Okay, cool. Completion of meiosis 1. Secondary oocyte is sitting in your fallopian tube and just waiting to be fertilized. If it's not fertilized, it'll die. Sperm comes along, fertilizes the secondary oocyte, and then they will both go through meiosis 2 together, also known as fertilization, to produce a zygote. And then a zygote will eventually produce a baby. In the process, you will also have a second polar body, which is extra genetic material, which is then discarded, recycled. Because the thing is with genetics, and we'll talk about chromosomal abnormalities and everything like that, in genetics, you can only have a certain amount. So the female oocyte has to get rid of these polar bodies in order to have a living baby. So we're going to refer back to this. So when the primary oocyte divides, it consists of a second oocyte in the first polar body. Okay? Polar body's extra material. Secondary oocyte is completion of meiosis 1.
So, sorry.
No, you're fine.
So the polar body isn't really anything, it's just genetic.
Yeah, it's just material. You can't,
Extra.
yeah, it's just extra. It either gets recycled or discarded. We don't really know what happens. I just say recycled because I think that makes sense. So the primary oocyte will split. First polar body is discarded. Secondary oocyte contains genetic information, potential for baby. Okay. When the oocyte is fertilized, it will undergo the second meiotic division. So fertilization is when the egg and sperm come in contact. They complete meiosis 2, have a zygote. Fertilization happens, comes in contact with sperm. When an oocyte DNA comes in contact with sperm DNA. When fertilized, an oocyte will go through meiosis 2. So technically, if you're thinking about sperm and sperm maturation and everything, the sperm is done maturing. It's the oocyte that is actually changing at this point. Yeah, because sperm is matured, and then you can kind of think about the oocyte like eating the sperm. The sperm is done, but it goes through the zygote, The sperm doesn't go through meiosis 2 twice. It doesn't do that. When the secondary oocyte divides, it consists of a zygote and a secondary polar body. The second polar body is discarded. Zygote will contain genetic information from the sperm and the egg. Doesn't that sound good? Yeah. I'm glad I didn't mess that up. Okay. So that is how a baby is formed. Now we're going to go through follicular maturation. follicular maturation is how does the female's egg mature, okay? And this is, so before, you know, we talked about, we're going to talk about meiosis 1 in the female more in depth. So if you want to put follicular maturation / meiosis 1, this is meiosis 1. But it's just more in depth. The first part was a whole process, like the big picture. Yeah, it was just an overview. So I was just checking if Shannon. So the oocyte is known as the egg yolk. So we're going to get this picture up here. And this will help too when we talk about the menstrual cycle. So we have our oocyte. This is known as egg yolk. And then we're also going to be covering the egg white portion of it too. So the thing is, we're going to go from, the whole thing's a follicle.
Okay.
This is, I guess, egg whites. This whole thing is a follicle. So both are follicles. This will become the corpus luteum eventually. But it's not quite yet because they're together. So when they're together, it's a follicle. When the oocyte leaves this portion of the follicle, this will become the corpus luteum. Luteum. I think I spelled that wrong. Luteum. Okay. Well, you get the point. So the last section covered the egg yolk. So we talked a little bit about, you know, this oocyte will then leave the ovary, and it will go to fallopian tubule to be fertilized or become a period. Now we're going to be talking about the egg white portion of it. It's kind of both, but the egg white is more of the follicle. Yeah. Well, it's not what's left. This is meiosis 1, but we're going to be talking about this portion also. It's going to be talking about both, but more so this because it's egg cell develops. This doesn't happen quite yet. So during meiosis 1, you have the egg white develop, and then you have the egg yolk, which then will go through meiosis 2. Does that make sense? Kind of. Okay, we'll get through it. So the follicles utilize follicle-stimulating hormone during puberty. This is true, right? Because a follicle is a sex cell. So follicle-stimulating hormone stimulates the follicle. When puberty occurs, the anterior pituitary gland, and do I have a worksheet over this? I think I do. This is a little overview, this one. I made one for female, but not for male. This is worksheet number 6.
Oh, 6.
Yeah. But this kind of shows like the basic endocrine function. So I'm going to jump over here to 6 really fast. And you can see, so this is the process right here on this side. This is the flow chart, okay? And then this is the like definitions. So we don't need to worry about this quite yet. I'm just showing this to you so you kind of know where it's coming from. So when puberty occurs, if you're holding that out, you can see the anterior pituitary gland will secrete follicle-stimulating hormone, and this will cause the ovaries to enlarge. So I'm going to pull up the endocrine worksheet now. Sorry. Okay, so this is the overview on the right side. Okay, gonadotropin-releasing hormone, stimulated by female puberty. Gonadotropin-releasing hormone will go to anterior pituitary gland. Anterior pituitary gland will secrete follicle-stimulating hormone and luteinizing hormone. These will both go to the ovaries. So in the male, it went to the testes, and the female goes to the ovaries. The main outcome of female puberty is growth and development of ovarian follicles. So ovarian follicles meaning egg cell. Production of estrogen because the male's sperm cells need a testosterone to help the sperm grow. Females need estrogen to help the ovarian follicles grow, or the egg cells. The outcome of female puberty is ovulation and corpus luteum formation, also uterine thickening. When we go through menstrual cycle, this will make more sense. It's kind of rough right now. But if you understand the menstrual cycle, it'll help. So this was the male. Now we're going to go through the female, which looks a little more crazier, but it's just because of all the arrows. But it's pretty much the same process. You have your gonadotropin-releasing hormone. Gonadotropin-releasing hormone goes to anterior pituitary, which will then produce follicle-stimulating hormone and luteinizing hormone. Okay, I don't have it up here. In the male, follicle-stimulating hormone went to the Sertoli cells. Sertoli cells produced nourishment for the sperm, right? So we're going to talk about follicle-stimulating hormone. Follicle-stimulating hormone causes ovarian follicular maturation, and this causes growth of the granulosa layer. So the granulosa is this red. So in the ovary, so this is our ovary, you're going to have this layer is going to get thicker on the outside. On the outside.
Outside, yeah, I think
Yeah. Granulosa cells also then produce estrogen, but we don't need to worry about that too much. I'm just trying to talk about follicle-stimulating and corpus luteum. Luteinizing hormone, and this is why it doesn't make sense to me. Luteinizing hormone, okay? In the female, it's luteinizing hormone. For some reason, they use it in the male, but only females have luteum. Males don't have a luteum, so I don't know why they did that, but they did. So for me, that doesn't make sense. This really gets on my nerves because it's very misleading. So in the male, the luteinizing hormone, or the interstitial cell stimulating hormone, was responsible for the production of testosterone. Luteinizing hormone in the female is really, and this is the luteum, this portion here, it's important for producing estrogen, inhibin, and progesterone. So just kind of keep that in mind. I wish I printed this out so you could look at it if you wanted to. But
I think we have it from
from endocrine, yeah, if you have it from endocrine, then you would. But we didn't go over it because, imagine learning endocrine and all this.
I think we just kind of touched base on the hormone stuff, pretty much it.
I think we skipped these 2 pages, though, yeah. So if you look at this, you have your follicle right here is the black and the yellow, and that's your follicle, right? Yeah. When they split, this is your corpus luteum. This will become the corpus luteum, and this will become the oocyte, or the egg yolk. So this will split when this leaves. It'll then implant in the fallopian tube, and this corpus luteum will just exist. I put these on 2 sides. Right now, this process you're seeing right here, it's splitting, that's ovulation. I think of ovulation in terms of if you were to crack an egg and the yolk would come out and the white portion would stay back, that is ovulation right here. I just put 2 sides just so you could see both how estrogen worked and how luteinizing hormone worked. Luteinizing hormone is only released during ovulation.
So once the egg has cracked,
Mm-hmm.
the granulosa cells go away, or
They're not as important.
so they just
produce the
Yeah.
they're
Well,
just surrounding the
yeah,
eggs, right?
yeah.
So when it cracks, it opens up space.
Yeah, it
for
opens.
the egg to go up. Okay.
Mm-hmm. And the thing is, too, starting out, the granulosa cells produce estrogen. At the very beginning, the eggs are developing, granulosa produces estrogen, and estrogen prepares the uterus by causing vascularization and thickening. Imagine having a baby in there without a thick enough layer. That won't work.
Yeah.
So while the granulosa cells are preparing the uterus, the egg cells are also maturing. However, when ovulation happens, when that egg cracks, the corpus luteum will then produce estrogen, and the granulosa cells not as much. There'll still be some, but not as much. But the corpus luteum will be the main producer, and it will continue to thicken the uterus.
That makes sense.
Does that? Okay. So that's that, and we'll get more into this with the menstrual cycle. But right now, follicular maturation. So yeah, follicles utilizes follicle stimulating hormone during puberty. This is true. Label each process of follicular maturation. You have your primordial follicle, your primary follicle, your pre-antrum follicle, and then your mature antral. So we're going to go through these. These are just words. But this is the process. So if you're reading, you're looking at your notes, this is a clear cut. Like this is step 1, step 2, step 3. These are the definitions. And this is kind of, oh, here it is. I think this is, okay, so this is the first one, like we saw up here. This is the third one. This is the second. So your primordial follicle, also known as your primary follicle, proliferates into layers of granulosa cells. Layers include the zona pellucida and the theca. So this is this picture back here, if you can see it, and I'll pull it up. This picture is what we're looking at. We're looking at the egg whites. We're looking at the follicle. It's on the back. Yeah. So if you want, I mean, I can pull that up too. But so we're going to look at the primary follicle. And we're in the primary follicle does the zona pellucida and the theca layer. So I'm going to scroll down. And the theca layer is the this dark, my labels are a little messed up, but you can kind of see it here, is this dark, the dark pink at the top. So that's the theca interna. The theca internal is the light pink color. Or it's right there. It's between the, I'll zoom in more. Oh, shoot. The theca interna is like right around the edge. And then the zona pellucida is this blue. I know, it's really small. But, you know, once you like look at pictures and everything, that'll help. I should have made this a lot bigger, maybe. Anyway, so I'm going to zoom. Are you okay with that? I'm going to scroll back up then. The next one we have, and I'll just leave it zoomed in, is we have this pre-antral follicle, also known as the secondary. During the secondary follicular maturation, the walls of the follicle thickens. Follicular cells secrete fluid into small cavities. Small cavities merge into the antrum. So the antrum, where the fluid is collecting, is this portion right here. So that's full of fluid. Yep. Next we have, and this looks all weird, we have the mature antral follicle, also known as the tertiary or graphian. It's called tertiary because it's the third, like it's developed, but it's called this G1 because I think that's the person who discovered it. So yeah, that's usually, if you see like weird words, it's probably the people's names. And they're actually trying to move away from people's names because it doesn't make any sense. I'm going to name this structure after myself. This is going to be the pomart layer. It's like, no, just call it the external layer, please. So the oocyte presses to one side of the follicle. It then becomes surrounded with corona radiate, yeah. So this is when the oocyte, so this is like when the egg is about to crack, the oocyte comes to the edge, and then it becomes surrounded, and that's what'll help it kind of like pop through. So I'm going to scroll down a little bit more. And the corona radiate layer is this one right here between the antrum and the blue zona pellucida. And you want to label this while I have it? Oh. And this is a secondary oocyte right here. And I know that's confusing because it's the end of meiosis one. But is that version number 4? Okay. Are we good there? Okay. So this is, yeah, fun and tedious.
So, I think we skipped one real quick.
Yeah. Okay.
Right here.
What is true? Yeah. No, go ahead. No, don't apologize. I was gonna go back. So, what is true of ovarian cells outside the follicle? Ovarian cells are organized into layers. We're very organized. Ovarian layers organization occurs when the follicle matures. So, it organizes into layers because it says, okay, once you mature, then you're the next one, and you're the next one. So that's why it's organized. The theca interna produces steroids. And then all the above are true. So, yep, all those are true about the ovarian cell. That's all I could really think about what he would ask about a follicle, or Janet would, she. So most of the primary follicles, a lot of them begin maturing, but only one dominant follicle outgrows them all. This one dominant follicle will become either the baby or the period, right? We don't want two. And the reason why twins happen isn't because you don't produce two cells. What happens with twins is the egg either completely separates or it partially separates, or I don't quite remember what the process is. But twins don't happen when they're two.
Kind of twins, right? Why?
Yeah.
Like they're two, 1 and 2 sperm is
Well, because I think with there's fraternal twins and fraternal or paternal. Anyway, but they're twins that look similar, but they're not identical. And that's because there are two sperm cells contacted the egg. So two sperm cells contacted the egg, produce two different kinds of babies. Okay, there's no two eggs, but two sperm cells, one egg. With the, it's because of dad, yeah. You, and then when we think about triplets, 3 of yours. But with the other kinds of twins, the identical twins, sperm has, the reason why they look a little different is because each sperm has different genetic material. Even though they're both from dad, different genetic material. With identical twins, one sperm, one egg. Okay? The egg splits. Typically, the egg splits and kind of stays together. But what happens with same sperm, same egg is that it splits completely. Then you have twins with the same genetic material, the same sperm, the same egg, versus the 2 different sperm, 2 different eggs. Make sense?
Yeah. Is there like a difference when they sit in the mother's, where
Womb?
they sit in the same sac, or are they like in the same sac, or are they in different
Oh.
sac? You know what I mean?
I'm not sure. I would think they would be in the same one,
The same sac.
but I can't say 100% because I don't know for sure. But yeah, good question. I gotta look that up. So the thing is, only one becomes dominant because we can only handle one. One dominant follicle develops every week. Thank goodness. Every month, once a month.
That's enough.
Yeah, that's enough. No, thank you. No, thank you. Once a month, not once a week. I mean, imagine all that pain going through. I'm on my weekly,
Yeah, me too. Like,
which means oh my gosh. And this is just a fun fact. It takes 300 days for the follicles to mature. However, there's a lot of them developing at the same time. So because there's a lot of them developing at the same time, they're always ready to go. Woohoo! So ovulation occurs in the ovary, and ovulation is when these separate. So when they separate, you crack the egg, the yolk goes one way, the egg white stays in the ovary. That's ovulation. This occurs when the secondary oocyte and the first polar body are released from the mature antral follicle. Mature antral follicle will stay behind, oocyte will come out, secondary polar body will come out, but then it'll be recycled. But just crack the egg. And then when they separate, and what is that? So this matures and it separates. That's ovulation, but it's also meiosis 1. Yep. Okay. To go along with our analogy, the egg yolk comes out, egg whites. Some of the egg whites come out, but most of it stays. Yeah, cracking a chicken egg. Woohoo. Okay, so what controls, and this is basically all I said, so ovulation is also known as the LH SERV, luteinizing hormone. So what happens, like before you have your period, follicle stimulating hormone, okay, let's think. Ovulation. Okay. So in your ovary, you have your follicles maturing, right? 300 are maturing, but they're maturing at the same time. There's always one ready to go. That's because of your follicle stimulating hormone, right? So they're always maturing. Luteinizing hormone is stored in your anterior pituitary, and it's just stored there for a while. And then LH surge, once that luteinizing hormone is released, that's what will cause the separation to happen. So while
After LH, it's
yeah,
split.
yep, luteinizing hormone, and think about luteinizing hormone. This mature antrum. After the split, it will become the corpus luteum. So together with the oocyte, this follicle is with the oocyte and the mature antrum. This plus this will be the follicle. When they split, it'll become the oocyte and the corpus luteum. Corpus luteum happens because of luteinizing hormone. Why males don't have a luteum, so that's that. The function of luteinizing hormone is to cause weakening and swelling of the follicle. So the follicle, this whole thing becomes weak, it swells, it bursts. That's great, right? We have bursting in our bodies. After the oocyte is released, it will travel to the fallopian or the uterine tube. Uterine. Okay, fallopian tube. Keep in mind, only a little bit of the egg white comes out. So a little bit of it comes out, but that's the first polar body. We don't really do much with that. It gets recycled. Most of the follicle remains in the ovary and becomes the corpus luteum. So now that the egg yolk, they're mainly egg whites, yeah. So the corpus luteum serves as a temporary endocrine structure. So it's very temporary. It secretes progesterone and estrogen. Estrogen is really good, and I'm going to switch back over to here. So this is your corpus luteum. This is ovulation when it separates. It'll also produce inhibin, but we'll go into that later. So when it separates, the corpus luteum will produce progesterone. Progesterone will cause the uterus to vascularize. So it will increase blood flow to the uterus. Progesterone is also really important for pregnancy. So I like to think about the progesterone. Okay, so vascularization, what's that? Blood, right? So I like to think of progesterone, puberty, pain, and pregnancy. So they all start with P's, if that helps. Estrogen is important because it causes the uterus to get thicker. We need it to get thicker with more cells around it. Does that make sense? Okay. Okay. If the egg is not fertilized, the corpus luteum will degenerate. So this statement is false. Just take out not. Oh no. So, basically, when the corpus luteum degenerates, that's when our body's like, well, there's not enough progesterone to vascularize, and there's not enough estrogen to form the layer over it. So what happens is that sheds, and it just kind of comes out. And it takes a week for that to happen. So when the corpus luteum degenerates, that's when we start our period. So when in the uterus, we have our period, but in the corpus luteum, it then becomes the corpus albicans, which means it just turns white. So I think about the corpus luteum as dying. When someone dies, they turn white. They turn pale because they don't have any blood flow. Okay. And usually the corpus luteum, what causes it to die is if the egg isn't fertilized. If the egg is not fertilized, why are we vascularizing the uterus? It's dead. Let's get it out of here. So when the egg, so when the egg is not fertilized, it dies. When the egg dies, the corpus luteum detects this, and it's like, what am I doing?
Then it becomes, when it's dead, it's
It becomes corpus albicans. So this concludes the ovaries and all of that greatness. I'm going to stop it now.